Hello and welcome, it's Chris from Christopher Holt Training. Welcome to this week's tutorial. We're going to be talking about the difference between a disc bulge and a disc herniation. We're going to look at two fundamental parts of it. We're going to look at, first of all, what's the difference, and then we're going to look at what's causing them, because they are closely related and they do have a similar cause to them. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to not only understand the difference between them, but also what's causing them, and then you'll be able to relate that to the different types of exercises that you might be doing, the different postures that you're in, and the everyday type of movements that could be causing them as well. But before we get into that, I just quickly want to mention my social media, so you can come to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, anywhere, wherever you may be watching this. Like, follow, and subscribe. Please do comment on the video if you find anything interesting, something that you've learned, if you have a question maybe, but anything like that. It'd be great to hear any feedback that you've got and answer any questions that you may have. Alternatively, you can follow this link here and you can go to my lower back pain webinar, which is the fundamentals of spine health, which talks you through my formula for helping people overcome lower back pain. So if you're experiencing lower back pain, you'll be able to go onto that. It's completely free. It goes through my entire formula. I talk you through it all in 80 minutes. So you'll be able to find out not only what could be potentially causing your lower back pain, you can also start to find a formula and a method and a system that can start to work you towards overcoming that by looking at the fundamentals of what makes up a healthy spine. So what we'll do now is we'll get straight into answering the first question: is what's the difference between a disc bulge and a disc herniation? Very simply, a disc bulge is where the disc bulges onto the nerve. So you can see the bulge here. You can see a normal disc, it's sort of spherical, but here you can see that disc is bulging onto that nerve and is potentially going to create pain. Now, the difference between the bulge and the herniation is where this gel-like fluid comes out and through the wall of the disc. So here, the outer layers of the disc are still intact, but here it's bulging through onto the nerve, creating pain when it touches the nerve. So if you read here, this is from Mayo Clinic, a bulging disc doesn't always affect the entire perimeter of a disc, but at least a quarter, if not half, of the disc circumference is usually affected. Only the outer layer of tough cartilage is involved. A herniated disc, on the other hand, results when a crack in the tough outer layer of cartilage allows some of the softer inner cartilage to protrude out onto the disc. So what you can see here is this is the soft gel-like substance on the inside of the disc, and then you've got the fibrous, tough wall of the disc that goes all around the outside. So as I mentioned, the bulging disc is where it just bulges, or where the disc bulges onto the nerve, but the herniated disc is where it breaks through that wall and touches the disc. A herniated disc, which again can make it slightly confusing, can also be called a ruptured disc and a slip disc as well. So when you hear those, that's what they mean. It doesn't mean the disc has moved. So if you can imagine, there's a vertebrae, there's another vertebrae, the disc hasn't slipped out or anything like that. It's still in place. It's just ruptured onto the nerve here. So this is either the ruptured or the slip disc as well. So what we can now look at is what's causing this movement. What's causing this bulge and this herniation? And we'll look at that right now. The easy explanation for what's causing disc herniations and disc bulges comes down to movement patterns of spine flexion and lateral bending. And the only other part is when a disc becomes degenerative. So this is from a book called The Biomechanics of Spine Stabilization. It's the first edition by Benzel in 2001. And most disc herniations do not occur immediately following trauma. So when you experience the pain of a disc herniation or a disc bulge, it's not usually that moment that caused it. It's usually a build-up and the straw that broke the camel's back. And Adams and Hutton determined that high percentage of lumbar discs in the laboratory could be encouraged to herniated if the disc was degenerative, as mentioned there, or a specific force pattern was delivered. And those force patterns are flexion and lateral bending. So what spine flexion is this rounded back here. So you've got a rounded back here, and then you've got lateral flexion, which is that posture there, or obviously the other way as well. So that is your flexion, and that is your lateral flexion. So what's happening here is, you can see here now, it doesn't necessarily have to just be exercise. It could be poor everyday lifting. It could be poor posture from sitting in a seat. But any time when this spine goes into flexion, it encourages. So if we go back to these images, so if this is the front of my disc and this is the back of my disc, so if I flex forward like this, it's actually pushing that fluid, as we saw in the last slide, towards this wall here. So it can potentially herniate or bulge in this area here. Now if it goes to the side, it usually involves some kind of lateral flexion either way. So if it bulges to the sides here or here, it will generally involve flexion and lateral flexion. Now as I mentioned, that can be from poor lifting, poor posture, or poor exercise technique. Now this doesn't mean you should never flex your spine, because in some instances it's gonna happen. So what that basically means is the heavier this weight, the quicker the disc will herniate or bulge, or the more that you are in that posture. So if you spend 99% of your time in good posture and have good lifting technique when you exercise, then if you come out of that neutral posture and go into spine flexion, then you're going to have a greater margin for error when you go into that posture. The problem comes is when you spend 90% of your time in this posture, or you have poor exercise technique, or just choose poor exercises like sit-ups, crunches, side bends, back extensions, so on and so forth. So all of these types of things are going to add up and create these disc bulges and these disc herniations. So it's not any one posture, position or movement. It's a build-up of poor postures, poor positions and poor movement, and also poor exercise selection. So hopefully that's given you a better idea of the differences between disc bulges and disc herniations. And it's also giving you a better understanding of what's causing them, so you can then start going about correcting that and reducing your risk of disc bulges and disc herniations. So as I mentioned, if you want to come and learn more about this, come onto the Fundamentals of Spine Health webinar, which you just follow the link in the description, enter your name and email address, and you'll be put on the list and you'll be notified when the next webinar is happening. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from Christopher Holt Training. I'll speak to you in the next video.